Hi, this is Mrs. Duncan, and what I'm teaching you today is the very basics of literary analysis and our starting point every time for English 102 in every story or play that we discuss and talk about this semester. So here we go. Well, conflict is basic to any plot, but it's not exactly the same thing. When we look at plot, we're thinking of the story. What happened? What are the series of events or actions that make it a story? And that's just basic reading comprehension skill. Most stories are in chronological order. It means this is what happened first, second, third. For example, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. First the Three Bears have their porridge and leave the house. Then the next event is Goldilocks shows up at their house and tries out all the porridge, right? And the next event is she tries out the chairs and breaks one, the baby chair. And then she goes up and tries out the beds. And then the bears come home, right? That's the plot. It's just the events that come along, and that's our story, the end. Conflict is what we do when we analyze it, and we're looking for certain things. We go, okay, that was the story, that's what happened. Now, what are the key struggles that drive the story events to its ending? And what were those conflicts? So that's the key thing, and that's what we will be looking at. Now, keep in mind that short stories, because they're short, have one main central conflict. Doesn't mean they might have some little sub-conflicts, but they have one driving main conflict. But even novels or plays that are longer, while they may have many conflicts, there's always one main conflict that unifies the storyline from beginning to end. Think about any of those Netflix series that you've watched. You have an episode, it's a season of shows. Each episode is going to have a specific conflict, right? But the show itself, you're going to have an overarching conflict that kind of brings the whole thing through the season. And it may roll over into the next season, but it's somewhere along the line it's going to get resolved. And they have to create a new one. So when we do conflict analysis, we start with the basics and who's in conflict with whom, and who are the main ones for that central conflict. And we call the main character, the central character, the protagonist. In a short story, there's only going to be one. In a novel, there still could be just one, but sometimes there's more, depending on how long it is. You think about the series Friends. It's hard to pick one except per episode, right? There'll be one person that they're focused on. The main characters, sometimes in the old days, they were considered a hero. And in your Marvel comics, if it's not one of those group ones where you have multiple heroes fighting, it's that one hero. So in the more recent HBO Max revival of Wonder Woman, 1984, Wonder Woman is the protagonist, right? And then you have a central antagonist, and then there's some others that kind of join along, go along. So if it's extended, it can get more complicated, but in a short story, we're going to have one key antagonist, another character, or it could be an external force that resists or attacks the protagonist. So we always start with that, identifying who's the protagonist, who's the antagonist, and one is going to win and one's going to lose at the end, even though might be other characters involved peripherally. The next thing we do is we figure out what kinds of conflicts are part of this story. And so I'm going to use Star Wars, the old one, as an example, because it's all the same, maybe even the same movie. I think this is from the second one, perhaps, and Empire Strikes Back. So, but it's still, okay, so you have, most of them will have a man versus man or person versus person, character versus character, and in that case, you have Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader. He knows he's going to have a face-off with him. He knows he's going to have to challenge him. Even though he's in conflict with the Emperor, it's real personal. It's Darth Vader. But this is also part of a bigger conflict. Luke Skywalker is also in conflict with the community, the society that has the power at that time, which is the evil empire. So that's man versus society. The society is a larger group of people that have the power. He's aligned with the rebel forces, and they're in conflict with the evil empire. But he also has some very significant internal struggles. And now everybody has some. They're always going to play a factor. But whenever they drive the action, that's when we take a look at them. So man versus self, and in this case, it's primarily his anger. I think Yoda identified that as a key. Oh, there's so much, anger in you. There is, it's Luke Skywalker and his anger, and maybe some fear as well. And he said, those lead to the dark side. We also know that Luke Skywalker was in conflict with himself about whether he should stay on Tatooine and complete his training. It was Tatooine. Or go rescue his friends, right? Well, that was significant because he chose to rescue his friends against the advice of his Jedi Master mentor Yoda, and that drove these other events. Man versus nature, or it could be also environment, but specifically nature is things like a storm, being out in the wilderness, the beasts, the elements of cold, hurricanes, heat, all those kinds of things that can impact one's survival. You can be in conflict with your environment, nature. And one of the times Luke Skywalker succumbed, he was on Hoth and he was in a snowstorm and a snow speeder, and he was taken over by the abominable snowmen monsters and had to be rescued there. And so those are types of conflicts. So you can have multiple ones, but usually they're very episodic. There was the main time when he's in the lightsaber battle with Darth Vader, and that's a specific one there. And then there's the one where he's really in conflict with himself about what should I do? Should I go after Vader because he's hurting my friends, or stay here and complete my training, or the specific time he was in the snowstorm. So, but you want to know which one you're dealing with. All right, the next part, and this is the last part, is we break down the conflict, and it always has these parts. And so except for one, it might not have a turning point, but there's always some kind of background that leads up to this. And that's called the exposition. And it's not in the prequel, it's not in the movie before, although that can be the case. But in a short story novel, there's going to be, in a novel, it could be a chapter or two that's mostly conversations with background. In a short story, it's going to be a little bit of narration, but it's also going to be some conversations where these background things that are important lead to the conflict that's focused in the story. And so whenever background stuff are mentioned, it's always significant. If they bring it up, it's significant. So pay attention to it, especially in a short story, because they don't have room for extra stuff. And then what kind of kicks it off? What makes, there's been all this stuff in the background, but they've been able to avoid a fight, or maybe there's been a fight in the background in the past and they went their mutual ways, and or found a way to tolerate one another and avoid conflict, how we do. But something has ignited it, like you're in kindergarten or daycare and you've been playing just fine, and then someone goes over there and steals your toy, and can't let that happen. So what kicked it off? That's the inciting force. Of course, we always try to identify then the who, the protagonist, who's the protagonist versus the antagonist, and what are they fighting about? Why are they fighting about it? And if it's in the story, then it means it's not easily resolved. It's complicated. Something about this makes the conflict difficult to resolve. Things make it build up to a head instead of just the teacher coming over and taking the toy and giving it back to whomever. This didn't go away. Like, this little person has it out for you, and they're going to take your toy again, or they're going to pull your hair, or they're going to do something to torment you, because, I don't know, because. So what stirs it up? What makes it complicated? What makes this difficult to resolve? What keeps happening? And then it's not going to go away. And finally, there's going to be something, a crisis that intensifies it. You might be the person trying to avoid the conflict, right? Or the protagonist is trying to avoid it. They've got a goal, and this person keeps getting in the way. You keep going around them, and finally, they can't. There's going to be a battle, and there's no avoiding it. What is that crisis that brings it to the climactic moment? But every now and again, especially in a longer version of something like a novel or a play, sometimes it's diverted. There's a turning point. Sometimes something happens. Everything seems to be tracking along a particular direction, and then there's a turning point. I don't know if you're familiar with Shakespeare's play Macbeth. Many students read that play in 12th grade English literature. But in that play, Macbeth is moving along, he is knocking it out, and he's on his trek. He becomes king, and he thinks he's getting away with it. He has to kill the previous king to do it. He gets away with that murder, and it looks like it's all going to work out for him. And then there's a turning point. The next person that opposes him or seems to be in his way escapes. At least some of them do. Like he kills Banquo, but Banquo's son escapes. And that just creates, oh man, he's not getting his way anymore. And things continue to escalate, turning points. So sometimes something diverts it away. Things looks like it's moving in a certain direction, and then it changes direction. But eventually there will be a battle moment. There will be a face-off. There will be a winner, and there will be a loser, and it'll be over. And that's what we're looking forward to, is what was that battle moment? Whether it's a battle of words or fists or whatever, and someone walked away, they won, and the other one lost, and basically then the story ends. But there's a little bit more. There's one more piece. It's called the denouement, or we'll just call it the resolution. There's some impact to that. It matters who won and who lost. There's going to be other people affected. It's not just declaring the winner at the end. What are the implications for that? Is this final? Is there going to be a rematch like there was with Luke and Darth Vader? I mean, in that one with Empire Strikes Back, and he's like, Luke, I am your father. And he's like, no, his hand's cut off. And he falls below. He doesn't die. He loses that battle to Darth Vader at that particular moment, but his friends rescue him. He's going to come back. There's going to be another. There's going to be a rematch, which will happen, in a later movie. So what does it change? Is there anything about this that could still come back later on, or is this over? And how does it affect other people? So that is what we do with analysis, and we really have to put our thinking caps on. It really lightens up and activates the story to give it significance. And what we're trying to find is what's the importance of the story? And so it always goes back to the conflict. Well, what does that conflict mean in the story itself? And then what does it mean to us? What can we learn from that? We're never going to be in the same circumstances exactly of any of these stories. But if they're truly art, truly literature, they're going to have something meaningful, no matter what time period we live in, or what community we live in, or what background we have. They're going to be relatable because they represent human life, even though they're fiction. So here are some tips. Is there a clue in the title? Were you sympathetic to the protagonist or to the antagonist? And why do you think that is? Which one do you think the author wanted you to be sympathetic for, and why? What do you think readers can learn from this conflict and from its outcome, and from the things that happened there? And that's where we're getting to theme. What ideas or message about life that's valuable to us do you think the author's trying to get across through this story, specifically the conflict and the way it was resolved? And that's what we're getting at. That's why we break down the conflict. It is for critical thinking skills. We need to know how to do that. That's what analysis is. It's breaking it down into its parts. This is how it functions, but we have a goal. The goal is, what does this mean? And this is how we figure it out. All right, we'll be doing this every single story, every single play that we study. It's the starting point for all literary analysis. And then we move to character analysis, symbol analysis. This is how we figure out the theme and analyze that. But we always start with that. And you have a specific assignment for our first story related to conflict analysis. So, but every time we'll come back to simple, basic conflict analysis.